Hello everybody, this is Turbodog702 with Alan Wake's American Nightmare. This is going to be a submission commentary video for marathons. In the background we're just going to be playing some music from the OST for the original Alan Wake, as I don't have a raw game audio capture for this. So we're going to have to make do here. I had other people talking in Discord at the time. But we're going to get into this. So, American Nightmare is a Xbox Live Arcade title that was released after Alan Wake. It's meant to be kind of a side story near the end of what happens in the events of Alan Wake and the DLC. It's kind of a disappointing thing that there's 3 levels, and you basically replay them 3 times with a couple bits of variance here and there inside of the stages, but I'll talk about that as I get into it. But it was really disappointing at first since it came out on PC, but then I realized that at the time, Xbox Live Arcade had really strict size limits. It's actually pretty impressive what they managed to stick in this package. But I digress. So we're going to start off the game here and pick up our flashlight. Flashlight's a very, very important item inside of the Alan Wake series. It's what allows you to break away the darkness that protects different enemies and also commands objects. Like here, for example, the darkness is commanding these objects to block my path. By focusing my flashlight on them, I can break away this darkness and break the obstacle and continue on. Here we pick up the 9mm pistol. Basic pistol weapon. We're going to be getting rid of this relatively quickly as time goes on. This is an example of breaking away enemy shields using the light. We're going to go off to the side here and bypass this enemy, because it would take way too long to fight him comparatively. And when we get far enough into this canyon, we end up despawning him, so that's totally fine. Please forgive the fact that the splits are being obscured somewhat by the subtitles. Something I didn't really anticipate when first setting up the splits for this. So there are some decent amount of unskippable cutscenes inside of this, but none of them are particularly long, and the game's kind of funnily written in a Twilight Zone style of way. So it's nice and fun for viewers. So our primary thing that we're trying to do inside of this first part of the stage is reach the motel and get some answers on what to do. In the story at this time, we're supposed to be picking up pages, and the pages that Alan has writ and have been scattered about give him clues as to how he's supposed to progress through the game and through the stages. Since we've already picked up all the stages, or all the pages, you're not really going to see that too much. But we're making our way to the motel in order to get help from the mechanic there. And she's going to tell us about the things that she's going to give us a page that tells us about the things that we need in order to clear the darkness from the oil derrick that we had passed at the beginning of the stage. So we have all 3 of our things we need. We pick up flares here. Flares are really good for space control. They create a huge portion of light inside of a small area, so I use them at times to stun enemies or to create a safe zone. Here we jump off of this clip to pick up the valve, so that we can pick it up before these enemies spawn. We burn a flare here to control the enemies that spawn around us. It is possible that you can run past them, but I was finding that typically you would take a hit, and health is a little bit rough in the very start of this. We're going to stop off at the side here to pick up the Magnum. The Magnum's going to be our primary weapon for most of this run. It shoots slower than the 10mm, but does a lot more damage. Most of the guns are kind of trade-offs in this manner. Here we're going to go up to a change from the normal enemies. That guy, if you shine light on him, breaks into smaller guys. He'll break into 2, and then each of those breaks into 2 for up to 4 enemies. So that's why we're trying to avoid fighting him as much as we can. There is a dodge mechanic that you saw somewhat there. You want to hit the dodge to preserve your life, but also getting that slowdown does cause you to lose a little bit of time in the game, so you need to kind of balance it out over time. We're going to go ahead and pick up the car battery as our final piece. So we picked up the CD inside of that small hut, the car battery here, and we picked up the valve handle. Couple hits here, which isn't great, but sometimes enemies will keep up with you even at full sprint speed. It's very odd. So you just kind of got to cope and manage your stamina and your health well. Speaking of this, we are headed towards the diner. And I can talk a little bit about that type... Or sorry, we are headed to the oil derrick in order to trigger the next part of the scene. And I can talk a little bit about stamina management. So you can run for approximately 12 seconds, and after that, you are out of stamina. During that time, you'll see me jumping. It takes between 3 and 4 jumps before you get a full stamina meter built up. Sometimes you don't need a full stamina meter in order to get to your destination, so sometimes I'll forgo that. That is the basic concept behind moving quickly throughout the game. This is an example of that split I was talking about. So typically we just want to stun these guys a little bit and then finish them off with the Magnum. Typically you're supposed to break them into 4 before killing them, but it is possible to kill them in their doubles state. It's just a bit hard. The gun does have a little bit of an auto-aim property to it, which helps out quite a bit. So here we're just placing all of the items inside of the scene that we picked up in order to complete what is prophesized, for lack of a better term, in the pages that Alan found. The pages themselves are written by Alan, and they're supposed to talk about events inside of the story. The basic principle of the original Alan Wake is that Alan Wake is a famous writer who, due to the power of a place called Cauldron Lake, his words come to life and become true, and he spends the rest of the first game constructing a story in such a way that he can correct the wrongs that he has done and that others have done due to Cauldron Lake in a believable manner. He finds out that doing things like just writing a happy ending right off the bat is not enough, because it breaks reality too much and causes other problems, which is the main problem that happened with the original people that used Cauldron Lake. So we're going to go ahead and return to the motel to find out what to do next. And here we're going to get our second arena. We had the first arena when we were at the oil derrick. You aren't technically locked in here, but you do need to clear all of these enemies in order to progress. So these are your typical mooks. They aren't too hard. It just takes a little bit of light to kill them. Ammo boxes, as it says there, give you full ammunition, and they give you full batteries. Batteries are used to quickly recharge your flashlight gauge. So the big hosses right here, these guys take quite a bit more time in order to lower their shield, and they take 2 shots from the Magnum rather than 1. So now we get told that we should head to the diner, and that's where our antagonist, Mr. Scratch, went when he visited here. So our primary antagonist in this game is Mr. Scratch, who is an evil doppelganger created by the dark power that resides at Cauldron Lake as a kind of antithesis to Alan. And he's a manifestation of all of the dark thoughts and feelings that other people have had regarding him as an author. He's pretty famous for having a hot head, and people like to spread rumors about him, so Mr. Scratch is a manifestation of pure evil, who's also a relative genius. And he seems to have manipulation over time and space and the darkness as a whole that pervades this place and possesses objects and people. So we try to bypass this large sphere that's possessed by the darkness. That's sometimes really difficult, because if it just blocks the door to that diner, there's not a lot you can do except try and break it or wait for it to bounce away from you. It does a fair amount of damage also, and you can't particularly outrun it. That's why I was running inside of the, I believe they're called yucca plants. Those plants have collision, so they can block the sphere from following you, which is helpful. You'll notice at times I will flash the flashlight at enemies for just a moment. That is because when you boost the flashlight on enemies, they cover their face and it breaks their animations. That allows you to go past them without having to dodge or worry about taking damage. It is the preferred method of dealing with enemies over-dodging, but since I am using a controller, not a mouse, I can't speedily swing around and flash every enemy, but I try to do it as I can. That, and there are certain situations where an animation is so far into it that even flashing the light will kick the enemy out of it, so you'll still take the hit. So now we're headed on to the second place, which is the observatory. We picked up the keys to the observatory on that dead body inside the hotel room. The only thing that we know is that we are supposed to head to the observatory for some possible information that might be there. So when we arrive, we need to make our way up to the observatory and find out where to go. We're led to the observatory by... The guy inside of there has a coat for the observatory. He has the keys for it. And we see other things where it leads us to believe that Mr. Scratch was in that motel room and visited him previously. So we get an inclination that he headed here before us. This is a level that changes kind of often inside of the run. Every time that you revisit a level, we'll be revisiting levels 3 times. There are going to be changes that are made here and there to the stage in order to present more challenges or cut off routes for the player. In this case, we have access to this stairway that speeds our way up to the observatory proper, but later on we will not have this luxury. So we try to open up the door, and during this time we need to clear enemies because the game will not let us progress into the observatory until we clear the enemies that spawn here for the arena. The head of the observatory is like, wow, you came back here, like, and you think I'm going to let you in? So obviously Mr. Scratch has been here. There's kind of some hilarious dialogue here and there, but I'm trying to hit the high points of the story to kind of bridge the gap here. I get a little bit of poor luck here, not on this guy, but there is another enemy that is supposed to spawn, and he spawned and I think is just hiding behind that sign and rock behind there. And he just never found his way out until now, which is unfortunate, but it happens. So now we're like, hey, listen, those guys are attacking me, and you can see that. I bet Mr. Scratch got along with them just fine. And she's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess that does make sense, so might as well let him in and see what he's going to do. Throughout the game, you're seeing those TVs with static, like there was on the left. You can watch those to see special scenes that are small videos of Mr. Scratch kind of doing things at the motel. They're pretty interesting scenes and really shed light into Mr. Scratch as a character and as a personality, which they're some of the best parts of this game. Unfortunately, we skipped them for the speedrun. I have submitted as a donation incentive watching all of them, which is a bit lengthy. I will concede to watch every single one. There are 9 in total. But I've also included a separate incentive for just watching one of the more goofy ones, where it's just him acting like a maniac and dancing inside of the hotel room. It's only about a minute or so for that particular one. This is an improvement from earlier routes that I have been working with, where you jump over that banister. Originally, I had thought that that fall kills you, but it does not, as I learned, which helps out quite a bit for that early section. So here I make a slight mistake. I had thought that I was on the next part, where I was supposed to close off that valve, but I was late at night, and I just made a mistake, quite frankly, on that, and I'm supposed to go around the outside of here. There are extra items to the right that I could take for marathon safety, but since I had made that mistake, I wanted to try to make that time back if I could by doing that. I had also lost the time on that bad spawn on the enemy in front of the observatory, so kind of cutting corners to try and save time overall. But in a marathon run, I would definitely go to that corner. There's a couple flares, a couple flashbangs. I mentioned how flares are good for space control. Flashbangs are They take time to explode, just like any grenade, but they do a huge amount of dark damage, whatever you want to call it, light damage. They break darkness pretty much instantly, except on very large items. So while they don't have the space denial, they are very powerful for combat itself. There I go to the side to pick up some flare gun ammo. I need to wait for this elevator to come down anyway, so I just efficiently use that time to pick that up. We do not have the flare gun yet, but we will be picking that up inside the second iteration of the first level. Here we're installing a part for the telescope that was damaged. That's what we got out of the car. And now she's going to try to look in the sky. Since this is all auto-scroller, basically, I take this time to pick up a couple flashbangs and a flare, and I run towards the door. So as we try to look into the sky to get a signal that she had been studying previously, that was kind of odd. Hey, if it's odd, it's probably related to our cause, right? The coolant pipes get sabotaged. And as a result of that, we are tasked with going out and manually opening the secondary coolant valves. So 3 valves to get. This is the state that I thought I was in previously. That's why I ran towards that valve. The funny part is, even if that was the case, I had missed the valve to my right. So I just completely mixed up what part of the stage I was in at that time. So we're going to go ahead and open up this valve since it's very close. And kind of out of the way to get it with the route that we're going to take here. I'm still not sure if jumping off the cliff here saves time comparative to going around it, but it seems like it does by maybe a second. So here we're using a flare as area denial so that we can easily crank this secondary coolant valve. The downside to this is it does move this enemy back. The firefighter, it's behind us and to the left of us right now. And that makes him sometimes a problem if he decides to head straight back into the bush that we path through. So, example of using jumps to move a little bit faster as we regen stamina. Originally, I didn't know that you could go under this pipe and go into this area, so that was a pretty huge improvement to my initial routing as well. So here, we used to use a flare to control this area, but with the new route around the building, it allows us to bypass having to do that. We also don't have to worry about dodging certain enemies that spawn away from us. This also allows us much easier access to the front of the observatory. Originally, we had taken a spiral path to the right. That's still a pretty good path for normal play. But I've since kicked it out of the route after looking into a couple of record videos for this game, where it's possible to somewhat climb the mountain, and you'll be seeing that in the second and third iterations of this level. So now Dr. Meadows is looking into the sky, finding out what this message is. We are now prepping for an arena that we know is going to happen. So we're going to hit this ammo box here to gear up for it. During the second iteration of this arena, we'll have access to better combat means, but right now we have to be a little bit scarce with how we deal with stuff. We only have so many flares, we don't really have a lot of flashbangs, and we will need those for the next chapter to speed it up. So this is going to be kind of all flashlight and gunplay here. The reason we take this position is it gives us a clear sight of that and this ramp heading up to us. Enemies don't spawn exactly where I'm at, but they will spawn on this upper ramp. So by standing in the lower platform, it makes it much more difficult to hit enemies as they're on this upper catwalk. Oftentimes they'll be blocked by the large telescope arm there. Gotta wait for spawns here. This game actually has 2 or 3 really high energy songs compared to the original Alan Wake, which has kind of a morose tone to it. I guess I could talk a little bit about the differences between the games. So Alan Wake has a much stricter stamina system. Typically it takes about 7 jumps before you get a full stamina gauge back. and you run out of stamina in like 7 or 8 seconds compared to the 12 to 14 you get here. In addition to that, I feel like the dodging is much better in this game. There were times where you would try to dodge an Alan Wake Classic and it just wouldn't work. Like, you get the animation for dodging and still get hit, or it wouldn't respond to you dodging at all. So they definitely cleaned up the combat and kind of evasion mechanics in this one, which is really nice. But while the original Alan Wake was more like a Stephen King novel, this is like a Twilight Zone episode. So it's a very different feel to American Nightmare comparative to Alan Wake. So here we receive the message, and the message itself is another page out of this script that Alan was writing, talking about what is happening. And this one leads him out to the drive-in. So the drive-in is hosting a film festival. Sweet Samurai vs. Conquistador 2. Just Desserts, A Cannibal's Tale, another good one. So we stop off at the initial guardhouse here, and we meet Serena, who's currently possessed by the darkness. Can't really do anything to help her right now until we get the lights on inside of the guardhouse. She's kind of too far gone. Pick up the flares here for some extra aerial denial. I have added approximately, I want to say 20 or 30 seconds worth of extra items inside of this, just to add consistency to parts. In pure world record attempts, you wouldn't pick up as many items as I do inside of here, but I feel for consistency's sake it's well worth it, just to get runs out of the way. I am still relatively new to this game, but already gotten under sub-hour, which is pretty good, I'd like to think. Most of the things that happen are related to just efficient combat and just trying to run good lines. You know, picking the most direct point from point A to point B and stamina management. There's an example of me using the kind of light focus to stun an enemy who is going to attack me. So as mentioned, since I'm on controller, I can only control about a 240 degree arc around me. I can't just jump and spin and hit an enemy with the light. So we're heading to the power station here in order to turn on the power for the lights so that we can talk to Serena and get more information about what we need to do and what Mr. Scratch was doing for that point. So I used to go right here, but left is open in this area. Originally, I thought for this particular map it wasn't open, but it is. So by heading left here, we can stop other enemies from spawning on the right and blocking our path, which is pretty nice. So simple puzzle here. This is always consistent. You pull down the switches that are indicated on the panel above. I use a flare here because I noticed that enemies were still following me. I could hear them behind me. If they have trouble getting on geometry, then it's possible to not have to blow a flare there, but I did. So I flash here and blow a flare. I was finding that that was the best way to handle that situation, to get that cycle and the electricity. So we have these electrical derricks that shoot their electricity, and we need to wait for them to stop. It's possible to damage boost through the electricity, but right now I haven't found a great way to deal with it. So because of that, I tend to forego it unless I have to. The main concern there is that you take extra damage on there, which leads to a death. And since there's not a lot of checkpoints, we need to be very careful. Checkpoints are typically after major events, like we just got one right now, but also upon heading under lights. The way you heal in this game, you will heal your single bar automatically if you don't get hit, but the rest of your gauges of health are only restored if you go under the lampposts. When you go under a lamppost, it also restores your health. Well, It restores your health and makes a checkpoint, rather. It does not restore stamina, though, which is a bit unfortunate. We're going to make a quick side trip into this side house to pick up another flare gun ammo. So right now we don't have the flare gun, and we're actually short on flashbangs by 1, which is unfortunate. For now, though, we're going to head back to the guardhouse and see how Serena's doing. When we head back to talk to Serena, she's going to give us the code to the projector house. So we're going to make our way over there. So I tried to flash the guy on the left, but I must have just barely missed him, or he was already in his animation too much for it to affect him. So now we have the code to the projector house, where Mr. Scratch is currently playing one of the videos that you can watch on the TVs. However, the projector house is now shrouded in darkness, and the only way to break it is to get rid of the dark fountains, they call them, which are these things. It's 3 large dark consumed items, which means that they take a lot of flashlight power to destroy. So instead, we're going to throw a flashbang and then finish off kind of whatever's left with our flashlight. Typically, we would want 3 flashbangs for this, but unfortunately, we only have 2 right now. I decided to back off there because I don't want those enemies closing distance on me too quickly. So this one we aren't going to lose too much time on because we can just blow a flare. Unfortunately, it does kind of more dot damage, but it'll still do a lot. The real advantage of the grenade is the instant damage and the ability to run away afterwards, save a little bit of time. So we enter the projector room, and we got some information on what's supposed to happen in this room. We know that it's supposed to be late fall and it's supposed to be late at night. So we need to change things in this room to accommodate what's on the manuscript page. So we make it late at night, 2 a.m., and we make it, you know, kind of middle of fall in August. But we find out that that's not enough. Like, we don't have enough information in order to break out of the powers of Mr. Scratch. And now we kind of are introduced to Mr. Scratch's trap, which is he has created a time loop in which he has sent us back to the very beginning of this, and we're back at level 1. At level 1, we pick up the flare gun, which is only available starting here for this place. We could pick it up in a different place in this level, but it would be a larger detour than just picking it up here and using the flashbangs against the towers in the first iteration of the drive-in. So here's the interesting thing is, even though this is a time loop, some things kind of persist in people's memory inside of the time loop, besides Alan's. But they can't really put it perfectly together. They don't recall everything. So this is Alan's kind of way of writing himself into a solution for this game, is that, like, he gets sent back in time, but every time he gets sent back in time, people remember a little bit more, and they can prepare a little bit more. So you're talking about completing something just a few minutes earlier, or just a few hours earlier than before, and because of that, you're able to get more messages as a result. Pick up these flares. And right now, Emma has actually picked up the valve handle already, and she already picked up the CD. So the only thing that we're lacking is the car battery, but right now this car battery has been moved to the mine instead of on the huge truck, the semi. So we're going to head into the mine and pick up the battery. We are still going to have to head back to Emma to recharge it. But after that, we have everything that we need in order to hit the oil derrick and break it out. So Emma also has the motel key, I believe, so we don't need to go to the diner to pick it up. However, she's not going to give us the motel key until we make her safe, because she remembers that she died in the original run of this level. So she's like, I'm not doing this until you break that oil derrick and make me safe. And Alan's like, okay, I'll break down the oil derrick, that'll get rid of the monsters, and then you need to stay in the garage where there's light. Because originally she tried to leave, and that's what he thinks got her killed. So once again, we're going to have to make our way over to the oil derrick and deal with things. We were introduced earlier to the crow men, I guess you would say. They're flocks of crows that turn into guys. These guys are kind of annoying in that even though they don't have a large darkness field around them, they take quite a few bullets to stop, and if you aren't able to kill them in time, they disperse like that. The revolver only has 8 rounds, and they take 3 on each one to kill. So I wasn't able to clear all those guys out instantly. Killing those crow guys, even though they're not immediately in the arena, is important. They are counted as part of the arena completion. So once again, we put in the CD to play some music. We turn on the oil valve, and we turn on the warning lights. These are the things that are required inside of the story in order for the satellite to come crashing down to Earth and break the oil derrick. So originally when we did this, there weren't enemies spawning when we were headed back to the motel, but this time the game's going to add another facet. They are going to spawn enemies that we need to avoid in order to reach back to the hotel. There's an example of me flashing the guy, but it didn't stun him. He was already in his attack animation. So we're going to hit Emma. She's going to give us the key to the motel, and that's going to give us access to the observatory keys. And that'll clear out the second iteration of this level. For that, though, we gotta deal with this arena real quick. Because of how close the guy behind me was, I ended up blowing a flare there. Not something that I would typically do, but it's totally fine. With how I have this routed, we have plenty of extra flares that we can deal with stuff. So in between the waves of this, we try to spend a little bit of time picking up extra ammo, picking up our batteries. Because you can only pick up so much, and since we're only running the Magnum, we can't swap to another gun to buy some extra time. The other nice weapon would be the carbine, which you could pick up as you pick up the CD in the first run of this level. But it's just not worth it overall. You have plenty of time to be able to get access to Magnum rounds. The amount of time it saves would not be equal to the amount that it costs, or it'd be pretty close. So we're on our way to Observatory 2. So Observatory 2. So since we remember what is needed, we know that there is a piece damaged inside of the telescope. And we know that's going to be in the back of the professor, or not the professor, but the lead researcher's car. So we're going to go ahead and bypass having to talk to her and deal with all that and just get the part from her trunk instead, since we know we need it. To this effect, what's going to get changed is that path with the stairway that we originally used is going to get blocked off by a rock. And that is going to prevent us from being able to take it up. That's what it was trying to show me there before I moved to the side. So the car is in a different area. Pick it up here. So understanding some of the little changes that happen in each stage is really important. It's also one of the things that makes it a little bit challenging to pick up this game, is just realizing that things are not going to be exactly the same every time you do this. So we're going to make our way up to this and pull the switch. I blew a flare here because I've had bad experiences with those crow's enemies catching up to me and kind of locking me into that corner. So that's just a preventative flare more than anything else. Once again, since we need to wait for this elevator to drop anyway, we are going to pick up the flare gun ammo. I also checked my flare gun ammo here, I believe. We're doing really good on flare ammo, and I'm able to use it pretty well going into the late game. The last level of this has some really sketchy parts, so having the extra flare gun ammo helped out quite a bit for mitigating those. So after we've done this, she's like, okay, let's turn on the telescope. And Alan goes, wait, there's something wrong with the coolant valves. What can we do about this? And she goes, oh, I kind of vaguely recall something like that. We pick up the flare and the flashbangs there, since we're waiting for her response. But she suggests maybe defending the primary coolant valve instead this time. So that's what we're going to do. So even though that stairway is blocked off, we can bypass it when we're heading downstairs, just not heading up. So here we're going to drop off of this, which bypasses kind of zigzagging on the stairs. That's another place that I originally thought killed you instantly, but it doesn't. And we can kind of jump on top of those rocks. We can't just jump down the cliff into where the main coolant is on our right, because that would be too far of a fall and we would die as a result. That being said, these guys open up this door, and immediately when we activate this box, we're invincible during this animation, and they're going to get killed. So since we don't have access to these stairs, and we get blocked off on this side anyway, our only option is to take the other side of the mountain on the left. And on the left, they try to indicate the spiral path up the mountain that I mentioned by turning on some headlamps to kind of draw your attention. And they block the other path up the mountain with a large trailer that falls in your way. That's supposed to drop your path, but here we're going to see that Alan Wake is an expert mountain climber, in addition to Stephen King actor. So that's supposed to block your path. But this is actually kind of sloppily modeled, so you can kind of climb up the mountain there. And that's quite a bit faster than any other route. So even though these guys spawn, all we need to do is tag this and go inside the door. Those guys aren't fast enough to catch up to us like the crow enemies. So in the second iteration of the stage, funny enough, there is no arena. So we can just immediately talk to Dr. Meadows and kind of progress our way. And since we did this earlier and we had the primary coolant going, we kind of get more of the message than before. And this is the recurring theme, is that like every time that you're doing these iterations of the level, you're doing it a little faster people remember more things, so they're able to get more done before you get there. You know, and these are the things that kind of lead to your success. Which is a really cool way to write around the fact that you're playing the same 3 levels over and over. Like I said, it's really embarrassing that if you were to just take this versus the original Alan Wake, it would be the most embarrassing thing on the planet that it's just the same 3 stages over and over, but they try their best to justify it. And again, when you realize that this was originally an Xbox Live Arcade game with extremely limited constraints on how big it could be, like, it's pretty impressive what they were able to do. So this time, we know that we need the generator key, so we're going to head into the guardhouse. However, we do know what the code is for the security center now. So we still need power, but we don't necessarily have to return to the guardhouse to talk to Serena to get the code. We will still pick up these flares, though. So, once again, another piece of the puzzle that we no longer need. So as you'll see, when we start getting into the 3rd iteration of these levels are going to go real fast. Because there's going to be not that much to do. So the most dangerous parts of this stage really do happen at the power station. Particularly in the 3rd iteration, but this one's pretty rough as well. And it really has to do with the fact that at the power station, lots of enemies spawn, and it can make it really difficult to make your way through them without taking hits, unless you're doing what the game wants you to do, or if you're blowing flares. Which is what I try to opt to do. Again, you can control the critical path with a flare for a few seconds, which is invaluable in certain places. So making our way to the left once again, and through the right now inactive electrical field. I don't know what you would call it. So this time there's no block in the middle of there, so that's a little bit of a more direct path. A little bit of an odd animation skip there. Normally you're supposed to pull up that switch, but he didn't do it. I think it still took the same time as if you did, but for some reason the animation didn't trigger. Spiders do a pretty poor job of blocking you in, and they don't do a lot of damage. So we can just kind of bypass them without much issue. Funny enough, you can jump on top of spiders and kind of ramp off of them. With a little bit more time on my hands, I would love to do a little bit of experimentation with stuff like that. But it can be hard to do practice on things like that are very inconsistent. I damage boosted through the electricity there. That's something that, again, isn't super consistent. If you get stuck inside of it or get damage boosted back, you could eat a lot of damage. And this is kind of a health critical part of the stage. That's why I took the little bit of extra time there to drop a flare. So I have 6 flares right now. I know that I will need 4 flares for the final level of the game in order to break the final level's towers. So since we already know the code, we can skip going to the guardhouse as mentioned, and now the towers are going to spawn kind of immediately. Pick up an extra flare in here. We are now soaked in flare gun ammo, which is going to be useful for later. So we have 3 of these to break down. In the last iteration, there will be 4 towers to break down. And this is the advantage of the flare gun, is you can kind of just shoot the flare gun and forget it. Flare gun's very strong. The only downside to the flare gun for the speedrun is this. If I shoot directly at an enemy and hit him straight on, it does that slow motion zoom in where it's like, look at the cool thing you did. But not great for the speedrun. That was just extremely poor luck because the guy literally spawned in front of where I was going to shoot. And that's a nice little 6-7 second time loss. Nice little balance the demon. Or balance slays the demon in the background. That's from this game. Looks like the OST I was listening to combined the games. So this time when we make it to the guardhouse, we have more of the information. We now know that it needs to be in the middle of fall, late at night. There needs to be a film noir poster showing, and a spotlight table lamp is supposed to be illuminating a fire extinguisher. So here we're switching the poster to a noir poster, and here we're switching where the desk lamp points. But it's still not enough. We're missing the critical element that is necessary to dispel this magic that has been put upon the land. So we're closing in on near the end of the game. So it's taken 45 minutes for us to do all this, but the last iteration of this is going to be very quick. It's only going to take about 14 minutes or so, because a lot of things are done already. Here we pick up some flare gun ammo. Switch our gun while we're jumping here. The reason for that is normally you kind of stutter step when you switch guns. By jumping, you avoid that. So here, we flash that guy in the face so that we can avoid him, and we're just running down this canyon to despawn them at this point. We are going to have to take down one of those giant bandsaw guys soon enough, but for now, we just need to move on. And, since this is the third iteration, Emma's actually hooked us up. She has already gotten the CD, she has already gotten the valve, and she's already gotten the battery for the warning light all installed, so now it's up to us to just activate. So funny enough, you can activate these things out of order from the manuscript, which I didn't know for a really long time. I thought you had to do them in order, but that ends up saving me about 10 seconds here on this particular run. So all the time saved from this stage is literally because of that. So now that we've already destroyed that, and we know Emma has the motel key, all there is to do is now protect her from the hordes that are left over. For now, though, we gotta make our way down the mountain. Not the mountain, the little hill. Sorry, that was kind of a loud change in music. We're also going to have to fight one of the large bandsaw guys here. To do that, we are going to use the flare gun. They have an extreme amount of darkness power on them. They're also very durable. They take all 8 rounds from the Magnum to get rid of. He is also part of this arena, so because of that, we do need to spend this time shooting him. And even though those look like kind of bad shots, aim-wise, the auto-aiming corrected for me, and I managed to hit all 8 shots. And here it's just controlling enemies. I throw a flashbang there to control enemies and also get rid of the barriers on them. You want to try to prioritize the crow guys as you can, because if they break apart into crows, it can cost you a lot of time. It didn't do too much because there was still an enemy to stop here. But you really want to try to prioritize them. Unfortunately, it takes 3 bullets, and as I mentioned, that can be kind of taxing when you're in the middle of a large arena. Refill our ammo and our batteries. That's the last guy. So now Emma's like, listen, when you left, the light shut off, so I think they're messing with the fuse box, and I'm not giving you the key until you fix that. So you go, okay. Use the flare here to control this space so that I can pull the fuse box and make sure it doesn't get sabotaged. And Emma's safe now. We blow another flare here, because these guys tend to block this path. Nice little trash can there, working for the darkness to stop me. So, first time we've actually saved Emma from dying, which is pretty feel good. But we didn't stop this guy from dying. Rip in peace. Observatory dude. So the observatory, we've been hooked up again, as Dr. Meadows has already received the part that she needs to fix the telescope. She just needs us to keep the primary coolant pumps from getting sabotaged. So we can head immediately to there. After that, we were going to be doing that same trick to scale up the mountain on the kind of jagged geometry, and we'll make our way directly to the observatory after that. Slight change here is that we will need to clear some enemies on the way to the primary coolant pump. The doors are locked until we do this. I do have a sneaking suspicion that you don't have to kill the enemies, you just have to break their dark shields. And I got that during this run, so still haven't gotten a chance to experiment too heavily with it. But it would be a save of about 4 seconds or so if you could do that. See, because like this door is locked, and then once I did that, it immediately starts opening. So I don't know if that was just coincidence or if it actually is related to that. Pulling the lights here kills off that guy, so I don't need to worry about him. Once again, just getting ready to make our way up the mountain. This time we have enemies that are going to oppose us as we're making our way up the mountain. Because of that, we are going to control them using a flare. You can outrun them in order to make your way up, but again, right now I'm kind of still in a little bit of the safety phase of learning the game, and I figure blowing that is a small investment to guarantee that I can scale the mountain easily. So we're going to get blocked again, this time by a dark car. Flare does good damage here in order to clear this out. If I had a little bit more resources, I might blow a flashbang there. And that might have been the better option, to just blow that last flashbang, but I decided to hold on to it. Flashbangs do pretty well in this upcoming arena, funny enough. Because after this point, we have so much flare gun ammo. We have 4 additional flare gun ammo compared to what we need for the final level. So we're sitting pretty right now with that. So due to that, we can actually spend a little bit of extra resources on this arena to clear it faster. The biggest time investment in killing enemies is the time it takes to break their shields, so being able to break them quickly using the flashbang is pretty nice. So, just kind of working our way through this arena. Once again, just trying to optimize combat as much as we can. Definitely not the best first-person shooter guy, but no, you do what you can, right? As for mouse versus controller, I feel like it's... So, like, you can turn faster with the mouse, which is the primary good thing about it. But I don't feel like it's that big of an issue. The biggest issue is dodging versus being able to 180 and flashlight a guy, which is a little faster. So a lot of times these are almost on timers as well. This is an arena, but it is also somewhat on a timer for her to turn on the lights. So we refilled our ammo during the last bit there, so we can prepare for the end of the game. And with this, we have the final transmission, and we learn that the last thing that we need inside of the projector house is we need to grab a film reel and place it in the projector. And we come to find out through radio conversations that we don't listen to that this movie is an edited version of kind of a home movie clip that Alan's wife made of him, where it really humanizes him as a person. And that's the weapon that Alan is going to use in order to combat the personification of him as this evil, deceitful, wicked person that people have a perception of him with, is with the truth that he is a decent human being. So this time, because we know all this stuff, we've already gone to the guardhouse, we've already picked up the keys, and we've actually taken our car further down and went immediately to the power plant, which is kind of funny. But hey, I'm all for cutting out sections of this. We've also already went down the side path. That gate is now opened. It was closed in the previous incarnations of the level, but it will give us a direct path later on. I use a flare there because those guys can sometimes ignore you and be jerks. Health is very critical in this stage. We do not really hit checkpoints inside of this to restore our health. And the enemies are very damaging. We're going to be using another potential flare in this area, depending on how enemies move. That controls the two guys that are next to me. It allows me to bypass through here fine. Here, I use a flare, because look at how many guys are here. There's like 8 guys in this area, so I just shoot a flare at the ground in order to control all of those dudes. Here I have to wait for the cycle and the electricity. And this is the real advantage of having this much flare gun ammo, and I might even route close to this much in the future. It's just this safety right here. So, double giant with the bandsaw. The game calls them kings of the hillbillies, but try to stay away from that term, shall we? These guys do a ton of damage and block the path really well, so we're just going to go ahead and do that to keep ourselves safe. We now have 5 ammunition for our flare gun. We cut to the side there because a car falls in that path and potentially damage us and break our momentum. These guys can either be really nice or try to create a wall like they did there. So since they were about to make the wall, I just said screw it and shot the flare. If I was short on flares, I could opt to go to the side to pick up another flare. Hitting that restores my health and makes a checkpoint, so now we're relatively safe. Even in this place, there's a lot more enemies that try to block you more aggressively, so we do need to be cognizant of where they're coming from. Once again, the strength of the flare gun, having a long-ranged way to kill these towers. So you can kind of interrupt the animation of reloading the flare gun by jumping as you reload, which is why I'm jumping here, for example. I don't know if it fully reloads guns. It's a tech that I literally just learned the stage before this. It would be pretty nice if it fully reloads guns, but I think it's just going to be for the flare gun. I think it'll only restore 1 bullet, which is the max capacity for the flare gun. So, with all of the information at our hand, all that's left to do is to finish up. Put the reel inside of the projectile and kind of watch the ending. So kind of discussing some of the things with this. It's a relatively quick run when it comes to survival horror runs. It's pretty different. I guess you'd call this more action horror with this game compared to Alan Wake. But something a little different. You get some fun little quirky moments. Incentives could be, again, seeing the Mr. Scratch dance, or watching all the Mr. Scratch footage, which, again, is a bit of a time investment to do that. It'd be around 17 minutes or so. But it is an option, I suppose. Mr. Scratch dance is only about 1 minute. Something to note about the Mr. Scratch videos is they do have maybe a bit of a content warning, and I will link those in a playlist so that you can decide for yourself. Also of note, the videos are on one of the small TV screens inside of the game, so that does mean that I do need to clear areas, which is why there's a little extra time provided for that compared to the runtime of the videos. Nice little green screen here. Funny little bit of trivia, the guy that plays Alan Wake is different from the guy who voices Alan Wake, which is kind of funny. Anyway, so that's going to do it for Alan Wake, American Nightmare, for the Any Percent run. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this. Hopefully this was a bit informative. This has been TurboDog702, and hopefully I will see you at another marathon.